Hey everyone, how's it going? So what are we working on now? We're going to replace this rear differential seal. I made the short on this. And let me show you those. So this is the pinion seal that we're going to replace. Sits right in here. We're going to take the dry shaft off and we're going to get to that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take the fill plug out. So we want to make sure we can get fluid back in this thing. Judging by the fact that it's not sunk all the way in there, I'm going to say it's going to come out. And we're also going to be resealing the rear diff cover. So in the short, I say, I'm going to show you how to do the wrong thing the right way. Most of the times when you replace a rear pinion seal, technically the way you're supposed to do it is they want you to replace the crush collar. What is the crush collar? Inside the differential, you have two sets of bearings. For the pinion, this is the pinion shaft that goes in here. And I think I showed you that with the other rear end that I'm taking apart that I'm modifying. So you have a pinion bearing here and a pinion bearing back here. And what happens is there has to be a preload in between there. So there's what's called a crush collar that sits in between this bearing and the rest of the shaft. And what happens is it crushes and it creates a certain amount of tension on the bearing at all times. So when you unload or you take the nut off of here to take this flange off, you lose that preload. Technically, that crush collar needs to be replaced. However, you can't replace it unless you take the whole differential apart. So what I'm going to show you is the right way to do this, even though you're supposed to change that crush collar, because nobody ever changes that crush collar, but I'll show you the right way to do it. So let's start with, we're going to mark this drive shaft, we're going to pull this drive shaft off. So let me go get a marker, and let me turn on another light here. All right, so first things first, I'm going to use a Sharpie paint marker. And I'm going to put the paint mark on here. This thing's leaking like crazy. Wow. Well, you get the idea. Shouldn't have run that much, but it did. So anyway, now let's take the drive shaft off. Alright, so what we're going to do is, these are 12 points, and this is a specialty Matco socket designed specifically for these. Now, obviously I have the vehicle in neutral. Sometimes they come free easy. This one's not going to. Let me go get a plastic hammer. Alright, so this is a plastic dead blow. Oops, I don't know if I just hit that. Yes, I did. There we go, and it comes off. Now, what I'm going to do is I will usually bungee cord the drive shaft off to the side. See? Just have it hanging there. This way I don't pop it out of the transmission and it leaks everywhere. So let me do that. Let me bungee cord that, and then we'll get onto this. My tripod here actually just broke, so it's a little unstable. So I gotta wait for it to stabilize. All right, with the bungee cord holding the drive shaft to the side, see that? Coming out of the tranny, it goes off to the side. This way I have a clear shot at what I need to do here. So let me show you what we're going to do here now. I gotta change the lighting angle so you can actually see what we're doing, and let me get something else to hold the camera. Hang on. Alright, so what I'll usually do is I'll usually clean this up just a little bit with a wire brush. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to go bananas. Now, with that being done, what I'll usually do is I'll take a chisel and my BFH. Let me back you up a little bit. And let me lower you down a little bit. That. So what I'll do is actually, this is the pinion itself. That's what the nut is going on to. And I will strike the pinion itself in a particular spot, like here. So now I have a mark. Now I'll go to the nut and I will mark the nut. Then I'll go to the flange itself in the same relative area and mark the flange. So now you see that? Yeah, the marks aren't perfect, but they're pretty darn close. Now what's the reason for that? The reason for that is when you're going back together, what you want to do is, because we are not putting a new crush collar in here, you need to go a little bit beyond to put a little more tension back onto that crush collar. It's kind of a cheat, but it works. It's worked like that way for many, many, many years. So this is a trick I learned from an old timer, you know, when I first started in this industry back in the early 80s. So let me get a socket so we can get that axle nut, pinion nut off. Set you up like that. All right, hold on. All right, so let's blip this socket off of here, or this nut off of here. Put the nut to the side. I'm going to put a drain underneath this thing, because sometimes when you pull these off, they will leak, and this will not come right off. So I'm going to have to get a puller on there. Let me get a puller. All right, so I got my bolt puller set. And I'm just going to screw these in by hand. Usually what I do is I stick my fingers on the back side. Oh, let me guess. This is actually not wide enough. The spread isn't wide enough to catch in there. I don't know if these are in a little further. I don't think so. All right, let me check my other bolt puller, see if that has a little wider spread. All right, so my other three-way puller, or bolt puller like this, was actually smaller. So I grabbed this, which is for use with slide hammer, but this drive shaft here will fit it. This is too big. So what I wound up doing was I actually reamed out these holes with a reaming tool that I have. There it is, comes off. What you do is when you take these off, check your gaskets, or your seal surface in here. Make sure it's not grooved or anything like that, because if so, then you'd have to replace this or get a repair kit. Repair kit consists of an actual tin sleeve that you would knock over that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this seal out. Let me get a rag and wipe this off first. I'm going to try to keep as much of this goo from getting inside if possible. You can see it's pretty well built up on there. All right. So now with no load, see that pinion moves all over the place. All right, so now we got to get that old seal out. Usually the way I take them out, they make seal removers. I do not like seal removers, like the hook style. Actually, let me go grab it and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Hang on one second. That's one of these tools. And what you do is you go inside the seal and you grab it and you pull. The problem is these edges have a tendency to grab the edge of where the outer part of the seal is actually sealing to the case, and it'll actually put a groove in it. I can't tell you how many times I've had seals come in that were leaking, not from here, but from here, because somebody had replaced the seal and actually galled the metal. So then they got to sand it down and put a lot of silicone on there just to seal it up. So now what I usually do is this. I will usually take a chisel Yes, this is more time consuming, but this is how I do it. I'm trying to do this in film at the same time, so the camera's kind of in my way. I'm trying to work around it. Sometimes the seals will fight you to no end. I'm terrible with a hammer, so if you heard me miss, yeah, it's just normal for me. And the seal comes out. So now you don't run the risk of damaging the surface where this seal rides. All right, so now we're gonna take another rag. What we're gonna do is we're gonna clean in there. This oil is pretty nasty, I will give it that. So I'm glad we're servicing this thing too. So let's get this surface nice and cleaned up. Just like this. And a touch of silicone just sitting there from the old seal. All right, let me get the new seal and let's get that installed. Okay, so the new seal I have right here. What we're going to do is we're going to compare it to the old seal. I mean, it's very similar. It's an aftermarket, so it might be a little bit different. Sometimes you can check the actual numbers that are in them and see if they're the same. So we're gonna, yeah, it should fit there. And see they're the same that way. The other thing I'll do is I will take the flange, clean the sealing surface off here. I'm gonna have to move this light a little bit. And then just give a good look. Everything looks good. Doesn't look all messed up or anything. Looks all fine. And what I'll do is I'll actually take the new seal, make sure it fits. Okay, now one last thing that I'll do is I will take transmission assembly gel and I will pack inside here. And that'll keep that spring that's in there that keeps the tension on the seal, that'll keep it from accidentally popping out. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen that too. All right, so we have, there's a seal, it's packed like that, and I actually put silicone on the outer edge of that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna wipe this out one last time. Now this thing does have a rubber seal on the end, which will help push any fluid back in, away from where the silicone is. Now, how do you get that in without destroying it? Well, try to find something that's going to fit on the outer edge. And this fits pretty good. What's this? This is actually a front wheel drive bearing race. We save these as we press them out because these make excellent tools for the press. A little more difficult than I anticipated, but all right, this is actually a little more difficult than I anticipated, so I'm gonna have to go on to something else. I'll show you what that something else is. Hang on one second. It's this thingy that I actually found, but this actually makes a perfect seal press. Just like that. And you can see the silicone squished, so that's good. Now we're just going to wipe the residual off. And now it's fully bottomed out. It looks good. So we're going to leave that at that. So now we're going to put the flange back on. Now remember, you made marks. So you're going to line the marks up. It's not that this has to go on in this position. It can go on in any position. But since I put the marks on there, I'm going to use the marks as reference. That's all. That's all that's there for. They make an installer for this. I have BFH. And as you can see, I'm not wailing into it to try to make this fit. I want to make sure the nut goes on. It starts to thread on, but I want it to go in further than that before I start hitting this. And because I'm going to drag it in with the nut. Alright, that should be good. I'm happy with that. So now we're going to start to drag it in with the gun. I always recheck it, or at least give it a visual. You can hear it coming to an end there. All right, now the play is gone, but as you can see, my marks are not lined up yet. All right, so now the marks are pretty much lined up. See that? They're pretty darn close. You're gonna go a little beyond. Just like that. That'll be good. Maybe a hair or more. I'm happy with that. So right there, we're good. And like I said, I'm good with that. I'm happy with that. So now, you know what I never did? Like an idiot? I never pulled the full plug out. However, as you saw, I hardly lost anything there. So that's a good thing. But we're going to pull that fill plug out now. And then we're also going to put this drive shaft back in place. All right, so yeah, I was confident it was going to come out because it wasn't bottomed out in there. And once everything's all assembled, then we're going to clean this thing off with some brake clean. All right, so it's loose, so I know it's going to come out. So this way, when I pull the cover off, I don't have to worry about it. All right, so now got our paint mark there. We unhook this drive shaft. From the bungee cord. This way I can put it back up in place. Now I know some of you are going to comment about the fact that I used a chrome socket on that nut. These are heavy duty snap-on sockets. Yes, they're chrome. I've never broken one of these large sockets, and I've used them for axle nuts and everything else. I do have axle nut sockets, but I don't have an impact socket that's actually that size. But like I said, I've used it a million times, never had an issue. I would not use a Craftsman or a Harbor Freight or anything like that to do the same thing. I wouldn't trust it because they can break. So that's my little disclaimer for right now. Alright, so I'm just catching the bolts. Bring you over here. I gotta see if anybody else makes these sockets. I bought these from Matco. I'm assuming somebody else probably does. They're all good and tight. All right, so now let's move this light and let's pull that cover off. All right, so let's start at the back here. Actually, let me see if we can get a light somewhere. Does that help? It helps a little bit, right? Maybe not greatly, but it helps a little bit. All right. So now what I usually will do is knock these retainers off of here. And tuck them out of the way. Move the line up out of the way a little bit, just so you can get everything clear of the rear differential cover. So now let's start taking the bolts out. And they're a little too tight. Like I seen that 3/8 gun has seen better days. Still my favorite, but obviously it doesn't have the strength it should have. When I can afford it, I'll buy a new one. Just not in the budget at the moment. Alright, my battery is fully charged. The side. And they gave me a gasket for this, but I'm pretty confident this is a sealer, silicone sealer. Maybe not. Could be a gasket. I don't know. We're going to find out. Move you back a little bit and down a little bit. Sorry for the compressor running. I have to have it running. I need it. Oh, it is a gasket. Okay. So the fluid is meh, so-so. See if these are reusable gaskets. But, you know, This one's kind of rough looking, so obviously it's not something I'm going to reuse. Plus, I think it was seeping through here. All right, let me let this thing drip out for a while, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to wipe this down a bit. And I'm going to clean this surface area because it does have a rust buildup to it, and I'm not happy with that. The cover does too. So we're just going to clean this down. I try to go away from center as much as possible. It's not always possible, but I try to. If you notice the sparks, it's because I hit the very edge of that gear. It's not going to do anything. The contact point is towards the center, not on the edge. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. I'm going to have to do the same thing with the cover. I tried wire wheeling it, but it didn't come out quite the way I wanted to. Now my tripod here has broken, so I'm not happy about that. So let me see, hopefully it'll hold. Gonna have to get a new tripod now. Dang it, I've had this thing for a couple of years now. So that's actually looking pretty good. Now I'm going to clean this out with some brake clean. I'm going to get some brake clean and we're going to clean out that rear end up there. I can get onto it. All right, let's get that going. Okay, so what we're going to do is clean this out. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to go bananas. My main concern is the gasket surface and just, you know, get off some residual, that's all. Brake clean dries up pretty quick, so. And usually what I do is, because the oil will travel down and drip, if there's any remaining, so at the very end what I'll do is I'll just clean off the end here. Alright, I'm going to do the same with the cover before I put that on. Alright, so here we have a new gasket. We don't have the factory style one, the metal one with the rubber, but we have this is a Velcro. So now first off, we're going to wipe this. Get any residual off. We lay the gasket in place on the cover, and now we're going to stick the cover in place like this. Now we usually start by putting a couple of the bolts in to line everything up. And when you get it caught too, make sure your wiring or your brake lines, whatever, make sure nothing's getting caught underneath the edge of that. So let's put the rest of the bolts in. Trying to remember the position of the studded bolts. I seemingly misplaced one of these bolts. Oh, it's in the drain. I forgot it fell in the drain. Because I also cleaned the threads off on these bolts here, because you saw how tight they came out. Alright, now we're going to go in a crisscross fashion. Now check them by hand. And as you can see, I can go tighter. Okay, so now in case you lose track, you can always just start at one point and go all the way across. On the last final pass, you could do it this way, especially if you're just double checking to make sure that you got everything. So there we go, all's good. Get the brake light clipped in. And get the ABS line in. All right, so we're all good there. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to fill this up before we clean the residual stuff that's on the bottom. So let's put this up in the air and let's do that. What I should have said was let's put it further up in the air, and then let's do that. Okay, so I think I got us in a good spot there. Let me go get the fluid so we can start putting that inside the diff. And as you recall, I had loosened this up before. You can see there's some metal goo on there. So we're just going to clean that off. That's kind of normal to see that. especially in a differential, because you got to remember you have metal to metal contact in there. So a certain amount of metal on the plug is perfectly normal. I'm just cleaned it up, that's all. All right, let me go get the fluid. And let's add the fluid to this. Now we are using the factory fluid, the factory recommended fluid, and the factory fluid. The cap that's on here, this funnel cap, does not come with this fluid. These funnel caps, I always save them whenever I get it with aftermarket gear lube containers, because they come in handy for many other things. You can use them as little mini funnels when you have to. Ooh, Taco Bell. All right. Now you're always going to have a little bit in a container that you can't get out. I usually will take this and transfer it to the next bottle and keep going down the line that way. So right now, I'm just opening up another bottle. And what I'm going to do is the leftover fluid that's in the bottom of this one, I'm going to put it into the new bottle. And then transfer over that funnel cap. Well, there's actually more in the container. I know you can't see me. There's actually a little more in the container that was left than what this new container could accept. And as you put it in, usually it'll fill up so fast it hits one of the gears or something inside. So it'll actually start to pour out in the process of doing it, but that's all right. So on to the next bottle. More out of that second one than I did the first one, so I should be able to get both bottles. The residual, what's left over, I should be able to get it. Yeah, I got it all into the last bottle. And this should fill it up. And yes, that's it. She's full. You can see her dripping out. So we're going to let that drip out for a second. And then we'll put the fill plug back in. All right. It slowed down dramatically. Now what I've seen people do too is, like, some GMs, it'll actually tell you don't fill it up till it starts coming out. Fill it up to, like, I think 5 millimeters or more below the level there, because if you have it too high, basically the fluid in the tubes is going to be up too high. And if it's up too high, it can actually overwhelm the seals, the axle seals. So just something to consider. So that's, I've seen it where people have put so much fluid in here, like especially with the automatic fluid pumps that put the fluid in, they'll fill it up and then they'll pull it out and it'll be coming out like a tidal wave and they'll put the plug right back in. Situations like that, yeah, I've seen it actually take axle seals out, because it just overwhelms it. All right, we got a compressor going. me tighten this up. I'm going to wipe this off. Now as you're tightening it, you'll feel it there. It's kind of come to a stop. So all you got to do is like go about a quarter turn and leave it. Don't go any more than that. You don't have to go any more. That's a tapered plug. I've seen people go in so much it gets jammed in there and you never get them out. So just something to keep in mind. Let me go shut the compressor off and then let's clean this off. All right, so now with the compressor off, we're going to clean this. Let your brake clean soak in a little bit while you're doing this. Make sure you're using a well ventilated area too. But you let it soak in a little bit, it helps loosen it up. If you just keep spraying on it, you're really just wasting brake cleaner or whatever kind of cleaner you're using. And it doesn't have to be spotless, but you want to get the wet stuff off of there. This side has a little more goo to it. That wasn't a full can to begin with. But you see how letting it sit on there for a little bit helps break that stuff free. So that's looking good. This side's obviously looking good because we cleaned everything down before. So, all right, I'm happy with that. Once it dries up, it'll look perfect. So let's go. Actually, let me just take it for a quick ride, and that's pretty much it. Take it for a quick ride. The reason being, since I had that pinion off of there and I had the dry shaft out, I just want to make sure there's no new vibrations or anything in that like that. I did drive this beforehand just to verify, just to see how everything felt. So now I'm going to verify that nothing's changed, because you never know, things can happen. So I just want to verify before I hand it back to the customer. But yeah, so that should finish this up. So let's just do that real quick and then we'll be done with this. Okay, so the road test went fine. No vibrations, no odd sounds or anything like that. Because like I said, you never know. Something could have happened when I bolted up the drive shaft, you know, anything. So you always like to be certain before you hand a car back to a customer. But yeah, everything seems fine, so I'm confident everything's good. That's pretty much it. Hopefully you got something out of that. If you did, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. All right guys, have a great day. Keep wrenching.